Have you ever witnessed a moment so charged with tension that the entire world seemed to stand still? Picture a bustling airport terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Frantic travelers juggling luggage announcements echoing overhead, and one gate agent's furious voice slicing through the noise. A black man stands there, calm, but clearly distressed as accusations escalate. In the next explosive seconds, the gate agent threatens to call security, a move that could upend lives and reputations. But everything flips when the man silently produces a VIP investor badge, one that changes the power dynamics in a heartbeat and reveals shocking truths behind the scenes. Raymond Jenkins woke up at dawn with a knot in his stomach. It wasn't the flight that made him uneasy. He had flown thousands of miles over the course of his successful career in tech. It wasn't even the turbulent times the world was experiencing. Deep down, he sensed that this day held the possibility of confrontation. Yet he couldn't have guessed just how far it would go. It was 5:00 a.m. in his Manhattan penthouse when Raymond's alarm chimed. Outside, the city's lights were beginning to dim as the sunrise prepared to break over the horizon. He had a strict schedule: catch a ride to JFK International Airport. By 6:30 a.m., check in for his 8:00 a.m. flight on Skywinds Airlines to Los Angeles for a critical investor summit. The trip would determine the future of a major philanthropic project he had been spearheading, one aimed at boosting startup opportunities for underrepresented communities. Raymond's reflection in the bathroom mirror revealed a tall, well-built black man in his late 30s, hair meticulously styled and eyes radiating a determination that had taken him from a humble childhood in the Bronx to the upper echelons of the tech world. He never shied away from challenges. In fact, he believed adversity fueled his ambition. But on this particular morning, the tension he felt wasn't the usual pre-flight jitters. It was a deeper sense, a ripple in the atmosphere that whispered that something important, perhaps life-altering, was about to unfold. He dressed with his characteristic flair, a crisp navy blazer, a silver tie pin glinting against a white shirt and matching slacks. Underneath his left lapel rested a small but significant insignia, his VIP investor badge for Skywinds Airlines. It was a rare token awarded to high-level investors who had injected major capital into the company's expansion plans. Raymond had supported Skywinds because he believed in innovative business models that promised better customer experiences, and he also advocated for increased diversity within corporate structures. Little did he know that small badge would soon become a symbol of power and revelation in an airport confrontation he'd never forget. The drive to JFK was smooth. However, as soon as Raymond stepped through the sliding doors of Terminal 4, the hustle and bustle seemed on the brink of boiling over. Hundreds of people bustled around, some in suits with briefcases, others in casual attire carrying beach bags. But everyone exuded that distinctive airport mixture of excitement and stress. Announcements rang through the public address system. Skywinds Airlines Flight 2455 to Los Angeles, now boarding at Gate A12. Flight attendants walked briskly in polished uniforms while overhead screens blinked with departure times and gates. Raymond rolled his carry-on behind him, scanning for Gate A12. The line at security was one serpentine coil, but it moved at a decent pace. Someone recognized him, an old colleague from the industry, and the two exchanged a quick wave. He wasn't exactly a celebrity, but he was well known enough in entrepreneurial circles that occasionally people did a double take. By the time he arrived at the gate area, the seats were already taken by early boarders and anxious travelers. Some people argued with the gate agent about seats, while others were glued to their phones or rummaging in their carry-ons for their boarding passes. It was standard airport chaos, nothing out of the ordinary. And yet that uneasy feeling persisted. He decided to stand off to the side, near a large window that overlooked the runway. He checked his phone for emails. There was a crucial message from a philanthropic board member requiring his immediate attention. As Raymond typed out a thoughtful reply, he overheard raised voices at the gate desk. Felicia Morrison was a senior gate agent for Skywinds Airlines, known among colleagues for her efficiency and no-nonsense attitude, but also for a tendency to escalate minor conflicts into major power struggles. That day she looked especially tense. Short in stature, with a blonde bob pinned neatly behind her ears, she wore the airline uniform with the precision of someone who believed unwaveringly in chain of command. Raymond watched from a distance as Felicia tried to manage a line of passengers. Tension soared when a large family with multiple carry-ons held up the queue. Another passenger insisted on a free seat upgrade. Felicia barked at them to step aside, brandishing her radio as if it were a gavel in a courtroom. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether they'd be chastised next. Raymond tried to ignore the commotion. However, the crowd parted momentarily, allowing him a clearer view of Felicia's face. Her expression was that of someone who believed they carried ultimate authority within these airport walls. She was the gatekeeper to the skies, and her word was final. A prickling sensation crawled up his spine. He'd encountered people like Felicia throughout his life, those who sized him up by the color of his skin before his accomplishments. Usually he shrugged it off, but something told him this encounter would be more direct. As he concluded his email, a wave of doubt swept over him. The day was still young, but trouble seemed to be brewing. Skywinds. Airlines had a standard boarding process first class, and premium flyers boarded first, followed by platinum and gold frequent flyers, then general boarding. Because of Raymond's VIP status, he was effectively above first class. He had a carte blanche for boarding at any time. Yet he usually waited for his assigned group, wanting to avoid the pretentiousness that sometimes accompanied special privileges. When the announcements for first class and premium boarding began, Raymond stowed his phone and approached the gate to line up with the first-class travelers. The airline's policy was clear. VIP investors could board at their leisure, but he didn't want to skip the line. Instead, he queued politely, noticing that Felicia was scanning boarding passes with a stoic, faintly irritated look. He was about 3 people away from her when she locked eyes on him. There was no smile, no courtesy nod, just an intense stare that suggested suspicion. Raymond stepped forward calmly. The passenger in front of him was waved through. Then it was his turn. "Ticket," Felicia said curtly, scanning him from head to toe. "Of course," Raymond replied, handing it over. She studied the boarding pass, but also looked pointedly at Raymond, as if expecting some contradiction in his documents. "This says first class," she said. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" Raymond nodded. "Yes, ma'am. That's my seat." She eyed him again, posture stiff. ID Raymond offered his driver's license, and Felicia took an extended time, glancing between the license and him, as though searching for a reason to question its authenticity. Finally, she slid the license back across the counter. "What about your frequent flyer number? Do you have that with you?" "It should already be in the system," Raymond said gently. He was getting the sense she was fishing for anything to disrupt his journey. She clicked through multiple screens on her computer terminal, brow furrowing. People behind Raymond began to shuffle impatiently, noticing the prolonged hold-up. "Sir, I can't find your number. You may need to step aside and let me process the passengers behind you while we verify your status," she said, already trying to wave over the next passenger. Raymond frowned. No problem, but I'm actually a VIP investor with Skywinds. Here's my membership code in the app if you need it. Felicia flicked her gaze to Raymond's phone for a split second, but was unmoved. We'll see about that. Step over there, she said, pointing near a pillar to the side of the counter. The tension in her voice was palpable. This was no ordinary gate check. Passengers nearby craned their necks to see what was happening, while some whispered quietly. Raymond calmly complied, but he felt the weight of stares upon him. As Raymond stood by the pillar, he could hear Felicia continuing to board other passengers. Quickly white businessmen, a couple of affluent-looking individuals, even a family of tourists who stumbled forward with messy boarding passes. All of them were boarded with minimal fuss. Meanwhile, Raymond, a well-dressed black man with all his paperwork in order, was told to wait for verification. He approached again after the line had thinned. "Ma'am, is there a reason my documents are taking so long?" Felicia looked up, eyes glinting with irritation. "We have a system issue. You're not showing up as a frequent flyer or VIP. I need to confirm your seat with my supervisor. You haven't called your supervisor yet?" Raymond noted seeing no phone call had been made, nor any conversation with a colleague. "Don't accuse me of not doing my job," she snapped, voice tinged with hostility. "We have protocols to follow. If you can't provide the verification I need, I have the right to deny boarding." Raymond inhaled slowly. This confrontation was escalating quickly. He had always believed in handling conflict with composure. However, he also knew that letting someone trample on his dignity unchecked could produce bigger problems. He retrieved his phone and brought up the official Skywinds app, revealing not just his frequent flyer status, but also his name listed under a special category for top-tier investors. In addition, he unclipped the small enamel pin from the inside of his blazer, a discreet item that read, "Skywinds VI Investor." He held it out for her to see. "Here it is. This should clear up any confusion." Felicia spared the pin a dismissive glance. "Anybody can make a fake badge," she muttered, giving him a look that was close to contempt. Raymond was taken aback. "Please scan the code on my phone. I'm sure it'll clear up your concerns." She refused to even glance at his screen. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to step aside. I need to verify some details. If you continue to insist and disrupt boarding, I may have to call security." Those words, "call security," hung in the air like a threat. A hush fell over the immediate area, as though every traveler sensed the undercurrents of a deeply troubling moment. Raymond had a sinking feeling that what was happening wasn't about airline policy. It was about prejudice, plain and simple. The clock ticked closer to the flight's scheduled departure. Passengers started to get antsy, noticing that the line had come to a halt. Felicia had effectively paused boarding. Some travelers, especially those still waiting to get on the plane, looked nervously at their watches. Raymond forced himself to keep a steady tone. "Is the flight being delayed because of me?" Felicia tossed him a glare. "Don't flatter yourself. We're just making sure everything is correct. Security is a top priority for us." He knew well enough that the airline system rarely, if ever, had trouble identifying a passenger, especially one with VIP or investor status, which was flagged for special courtesy. This fiasco was unnatural. Meanwhile, other gate staff seemed hesitant to approach Felicia. A younger gate agent with a name tag reading Lucia looked over with concern. She opened her mouth as if about to intervene, but then turned away, apparently afraid of questioning her senior co-worker. Passengers who had already boarded peered out through the jet bridge door. Whispers circulated. Some recognized Raymond, or at least gleaned from his manner that he wasn't an imposter. A few even took out their phones to film or photograph the scene. The tension mounted. Felicia squared her shoulders. "Sir, if you can't wait quietly for verification, I will have security remove you from this gate area." Raymond exhaled. "I'm not disrupting anything, Miss Morrison." He read her name off the badge pinned to her uniform. "But I have a right to question why I'm being singled out. I've provided every piece of documentation you need." Her lips pressed tightly together. "Take it up with management later," she snapped. Then she reached for her walkie-talkie. "In the meantime, step back." At this point, a middle-aged white man in a tan suit stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm also an investor in Skywinds, and I recognize Mr. Jenkins," he said politely. "He's indeed a high-level supporter of the airline. There's no need to delay the flight." Felicia turned on him with the same hostility. "I don't need your input, sir." A small crowd formed. A woman in a floral dress glanced at Raymond sympathetically, and an older black couple gave him encouraging nods. The tension was no longer invisible. It was an open confrontation. Raymond stepped back, gave the man in the tan suit a grateful nod, and decided the best course of action was to text his contact in Skywind's corporate offices. He typed quickly, summarizing the predicament, and hit send, hoping for swift intervention. Time crawled. The flight's departure was now just minutes away, yet Felicia refused to scan his credentials or let him board. Meanwhile, she continued to bark at other passengers or wave them through, grudgingly excluding only Raymond. Moments later, Felicia's walkie-talkie crackled, and she called for security personnel to come to Gate A12. A collective gasp seemed to pass through the surrounding crowd. Some travelers tried to board anyway, but Felicia halted them, proclaiming there was a situation that had to be resolved. "Are you seriously calling security?" Raymond asked, unable to hide the incredulity in his tone. Felicia pointed her finger directly at him. "You have refused to comply with our verification procedures, and now you're harassing me. Step away, or I'll have you removed from the airport." This was the exact scenario many black travelers dread a confrontation that could lead to humiliating or dangerous consequences. Raymond's heart pounded, but he steadied his voice. "I have been fully compliant. You're discriminating against me without cause. You're playing the race card. Is that it?" She spat back, voice just loud enough for those near the counter to hear. "Let's see what security thinks of that." A hush fell over the gate area. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze: the overhead announcements, the rustle of passengers, even the beep of scanning passes. Raymond could feel the weight of every stare, every camera phone capturing video. He knew that any misstep could escalate the situation further. 2 security officers arrived at the gate, a man and a woman, both wearing stern expressions. They stepped through the crowd, scanning the scene. Felicia rushed over to them, pointing at Raymond. "He's causing a disturbance, refusing to follow procedures, making trouble. He's also boarding without proper documentation." Raymond took a breath and spoke first. "Officers, my name is Raymond Jenkins. I have a valid boarding pass ID and VIP credentials. This gate agent is refusing to let me board without legitimate reason and threatening to remove me." The female officer. Officer DeSalvo eyed Raymond carefully. "May I see your documentation?" Sir Raymond handed over his boarding pass ID and phone with the VIP listing. The officers studied them. They stepped aside to confer. Felicia watched them with arms folded, confident that her complaint would stand. Officer DeSalvo returned her voice measured. "Mr. Jenkins, everything seems to be in order here. According to your phone's QR code, you're indeed a VIP investor with Skywinds. There's nothing to indicate you lack the credentials to board this flight. One might have assumed Felicia would stand down at that moment, but instead she doubled down. He was verbally abusive and refused to comply with my orders to step aside. Officer DeSalvo looked at Raymond. "Sir, did you refuse to step aside?" Raymond sighed. "I complied each time she asked. I stood over there for about 10 minutes. I only approached again to ask if the issue was resolved." Passengers in the area began to chime in supporting Raymond's story. One by one, they stated they saw no abuse, no refusal to comply. In fact, it was Felicia who had been rude and dismissive from the start. Officer DeSalvo exchanged a glance with her partner. "It appears there might be a misunderstanding, Ms. Morrison." Felicia's face burned red. She was losing her grip on a situation she had assumed she could control. Just then, a corporate representative from Skywinds Airlines, a tall black woman named Vanessa Shaw, burst through the crowd wearing a crisp business suit and an airport badge that read, "Corporate Liaison." She looked flustered but determined. "Raymond, I'm so sorry," Vanessa said, ignoring Felicia for the moment. "We got your text and I came straight down from the executive lounge." Vanessa turned to the security officers. "I'm with Skywinds Corporate. This passenger is indeed one of our top-tier investors. He's a valued member of our business ecosystem. There's absolutely no cause to deny him boarding." Felicia's jaw dropped. She hadn't realized that the problem would escalate beyond her own authority. "I was just following procedures," she stammered. "He was suspicious." Vanessa glared at Felicia. "Miss Morrison, our procedures do not include singling out respected VIP passengers for personal scrutiny without legitimate cause. This fiasco has caused a flight delay and embarrassment to the airline." Security seemed satisfied that no threat existed. The male officer said, "Sounds like this is an internal airline matter. We'll be on standby if you need us." He and Officer DeSalvo stepped back, giving space for the corporate representative to handle the matter. A hush fell again, but this time it was laced with relief and tension. The flight was delayed, passengers were inconvenienced, and the cause had become evident to everyone. Vanessa escorted Raymond to the jet bridge entrance. "I'm going to get you on the plane immediately. We'll make sure you're comfortable and that you receive a formal apology from the airline." "I'm so sorry for this, Ray. This is not how we do business." Felicia stood off to the side, arms crossed, looking both furious and deflated. The entire fiasco seemed to be blowing up in her face. But it wasn't over yet. As Raymond walked toward the jet bridge, Felicia suddenly snapped, "We'll see if your money can buy you out of everything." The words echoed in the hush. Gasps erupted from other passengers who were waiting. Vanessa froze mid-step, turning slowly to look at Felicia. Disbelief etched on her face. Raymond too stopped and turned around. Raymond addressed her quietly. "I never wanted to buy my way out of anything. I've come from a background where people like you told me I didn't belong. I invested in Skywinds because I believed in a better future for air travel, one that treats every passenger with respect. Your actions today go against everything I stand for." He left it at that and walked on. Vanessa signaled for a flight attendant to accommodate him in a special seat. Meanwhile, the onlookers stared at Felicia, who looked almost shocked that her words had come out in front of the entire crowd. Once seated, Raymond tried to settle into the plush first-class seat, his mind whirling from the encounter. The flight attendants fussed over him, offering water and apologies. The plane's interior was a swirl of overhead bins, closing seatbelt buckles clicking and flight attendants passing out safety cards. Meanwhile, Felicia's meltdown at the gate had caused a stir. Rumors flew among the passengers as they took their seats. Some had overheard the confrontation clearly. Others only got bits and pieces. But the consensus was unanimous. The gate agent's behavior was out of line. As the doors finally closed and the plane prepared for pushback, the captain's voice came over the PA system, apologizing for the delay and thanking everyone for their patience. Nobody mentioned the real reason for the delay, but the tension was evident in the flight crew's demeanor. Raymond closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engine soothe him. Today was supposed to be a routine trip, but it had exploded into an incident he'd never forget. He also worried about the potential legal or social ramifications. Videos might hit social media. People would talk. But he resolved to hold his head high. Unbeknownst to Raymond, Felicia's troubles were only beginning. As soon as the plane departed, Vanessa Shaw initiated a formal complaint within the Skywind's corporate structure. She documented every detail: the delay, Felicia's refusal to scan the VIP credentials, the threat to call security without legitimate cause, and the final outburst about buying your way out. Skywinds had strict policies against discrimination. Furthermore, it was a public-facing corporation with many minority investors, and it prided itself on inclusive policies. Multiple top executives who knew Raymond personally were outraged when they read Vanessa's incident report. Simultaneously, passengers who had recorded portions of the confrontation began posting them on social media. One video captured the moment Felicia told Raymond to step aside with an unmistakable sneer. Another clip showed the security officers arriving with Felicia, loudly insisting she was in the right. The story quickly gained traction. Skywind's gate agent threatens to call security on black investor. Felicia's name and face began circulating, though sometimes in blurred screenshots. Comment sections boiled with anger support for Raymond. Condemnation of Felicia. The airline's public relations team scrambled to contain the wildfire. The flight landed in Los Angeles, and Raymond disembarked quietly. An airline representative waited at the gate to escort him to a private lounge. "Mr. Jenkins, we sincerely apologize," the representative said. "We are prepared to offer you complimentary future flights, upgrades, and a formal apology from our CEO." Raymond nodded, exhaustion visible in his eyes. "I don't want perks. I want real change and accountability for that gate agent," he said, voice calm but resolute. The representative nodded in understanding. "We're already investigating. We take these matters very seriously." Before he could leave the lounge, reporters from a few local outlets who caught wind of the story tried to approach him, brandishing cameras and microphones. Raymond politely declined to comment for the time being, stating that he would make a statement once the airline completed its investigation. Back in New York, Felicia had returned to the staff break room after her shift. Word of the incident had spread among her co-workers. Some avoided her, not wanting to be associated with her meltdown. Others whispered, pointing at her, as she gathered her things. She could feel the stares drilling into her back. In the days that followed, Felicia was called into multiple meetings with the HR department and management. She tried to defend herself, claiming that she had a gut feeling something was off about Raymond. She insisted that the system had shown an error. However, the investigation concluded there was no system error. The logs proved that Raymond's credentials had been in perfect order. Meanwhile, videos on social media showcased her hostility. A popular travel blogger reposted the clips with the headline, "Gate Agents' Shocking Racial Profiling Comments," flooded in from furious viewers. Skywind's Airlines found itself in the middle of a media storm. Within a week, Felicia faced a disciplinary hearing. The airline's executive board, led by CEO Richard Kaufman, decided that her behavior was irreconcilable with their policies. They terminated her employment contract, issuing a public statement condemning discrimination. Felicia was stunned. She had been with the airline for over a decade. She had a pension plan, benefits, a stable career. All of that now hung in jeopardy. She tried to muster outrage to claim she was the victim of a misunderstanding, but the tide of public opinion and the undeniable documentation proved too strong. Meanwhile, Raymond's philanthropic conference in Los Angeles went successfully. Despite the emotional toll of the incident, he delivered an inspiring keynote speech about inclusion and innovation. Word of the airport fiasco had preceded him, and many in the crowd admired how he had handled the situation with composure. At the close of the conference, reporters again approached him. This time he decided to speak. In a short interview on camera, he said, "Skywinds is a company I believed in, and I still believe many people within that organization strive for fairness and excellence. However, what happened to me is not an isolated incident. It reflects a broader issue of racial profiling and discrimination that people of color face in professional and everyday settings. I hope that through this incident, we can urge companies to strengthen training, enforce anti-discrimination policies, and hold employees accountable. I also want to see society continue moving toward understanding that success and dignity belong to everyone, regardless of race or background." His words resonated widely, fueling debates about racism in customer service settings and corporate responsibility. Weeks passed. Felicia found herself unemployed with news articles referencing her meltdown at JFK. She had trouble finding that new work. Potential employers discovered the viral videos and turned her away. Even friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be seen aligning with her. Some family members criticized her, while others insisted she had been set up. But the evidence on social media was clear. In desperation, Felicia filed for unemployment benefits. She also posted a series of videos on a lesser-known platform, claiming she was unfairly dismissed. The public reaction was largely negative, calling her out for refusing to take responsibility. She sank into bitterness, replaying the incident over and over in her mind. She realized too late that she had allowed her prejudices to cost her a career, and that her attempt to cling to power in that moment had backfired spectacularly. One rainy afternoon, Felicia decided to visit a job fair in Midtown Manhattan, hoping to find any position that would accept her. Booth after booth turned her down upon discovering her past. Near the exit, she encountered a small kiosk run by a local community outreach program. The sign read, "Bridging the Gap Workforce Reintegration for Marginalized Groups." She hesitated ironically, finding herself potentially in need of help from an organization that championed inclusivity. A young black woman staffing the kiosk recognized her from the viral videos, but greeted her politely nonetheless. Felicia felt a stab of shame. She mumbled that she was looking for training opportunities or something to help her start over. It wasn't an instant redemption story, but in that brief exchange, Felicia sensed that the only way forward was to confront her biases, own her mistakes, and commit to genuine change. Whether or not she was truly willing to do so remained to be seen. But the seeds were planted, a glimmer of understanding that her downfall was self-made. Far removed from Felicia's struggles, Raymond continued to expand his philanthropic work. He set up a foundation focusing on professional training for at-risk youth, helping them gain exposure to the tech world. At the same time, he spearheaded a new initiative with Skywinds, a comprehensive training program on diversity and conflict resolution for all frontline staff. Skywinds' board, eager to prevent future PR disasters, adopted Raymond's proposals swiftly. They reworked their employee handbook, introduced mandatory workshops, and installed a new system that flagged potential discrepancies or repeated complaints against gate agents. Vanessa Shaw stayed in close contact with Raymond, keeping him updated on the airline's progress. "It's a shame you had to endure such an incident," she told him one afternoon, via video call. "But your push for reform is making waves. We're seeing real improvement." Raymond offered a wry smile. "Change often comes from adversity. I'm just glad the airline is stepping up." Time passed, but the sting of the incident at Gate A12 never fully left Raymond Jenkins. It didn't haunt him, not exactly, but it resurfaced at odd moments. During a pause in a board meeting when he'd glance at an airline's inclusivity report, or during a quiet cab ride through a city where he used to be questioned simply for wearing a suit in the wrong neighborhood. And sometimes it resurfaced where he least expected it, like on a smooth, uneventful flight from Chicago O'Hare to New York. Raymond was flying Skywinds Airlines again. The irony wasn't lost on him. But this time, everything was different. At the gate, the new agent, young, attentive professional, greeted him with warmth. "Mr. Jenkins." "Welcome back," she said with a smile. "Thank you for flying with us." There was no skepticism, no scanning him from head to toe. Just professionalism, respect. And it didn't feel rehearsed, it felt genuine. As he settled into his seat, Raymond allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The plush leather, the hum of boarding announcements, the subtle flicker of overhead lights, he'd experienced it all 100 times. But this time he felt something new trust, not just in the process, but in the progress. He thought of Felicia Morrison, where she might be now, what she might be feeling. Her actions had caused pain, and her downfall was her own doing. And yet, in the vast, tangled web of cause and effect, she had unknowingly catalyzed change. Real change. The pilot welcomed passengers, and the jet began its taxi. Raymond watched the airport fade behind them, then pulled out his phone. Vanessa Shaw had sent a message. "Skywinds is launching a community outreach partnership with HBCUs. We want you to keynote the launch next month. You in?" He smiled and typed back, "Absolutely." "Let's keep building forward." Later during the flight, as Raymond sipped a coffee and reviewed proposals for his foundation, a young flight attendant paused at his row. "I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Jenkins," she said quietly. "A lot of us heard what happened. The way you handled it, it changed how we look at our roles." Raymond met her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After landing, as he exited the plane and stepped into the familiar rush of JFK, he realized the full arc of the moment. The very company that once nearly humiliated him had become a platform for his values. Not just because of what happened, but because of how he chose to respond. He didn't seek revenge. He demanded better. And now that choice had woven itself into every corner of the airline, from its training programs to its gate agents to the quiet conversations happening behind the scenes. That was the twist of fate he hadn't seen coming. And it was far more satisfying than any first-class upgrade ever could be. In the days following the viral confrontation, Raymond Jenkins's story reverberated far beyond airport terminals. News outlets dissected it from every angle: racial bias in customer service, corporate accountability, and the unexpected power dynamic when the victim is not just a customer, but a prominent investor. Comment sections on social media buzzed with support, outrage, and debate. Some people saw the incident as a watershed moment for reckoning. Others, more cynical, questioned whether anything would really change. But amid the noise, one sentiment rose consistently: respect must never be negotiable. Raymond, however, remained remarkably measured in his public response. When asked about the confrontation during speaking engagements or interviews, he didn't fixate on Felicia Morrison's name or the specifics of her behavior. Instead, he elevated the conversation. "I don't want the story to just be about one bad gate agent," he would say. "I want it to highlight the structural issues that allow bias to fester unchecked. What happened to me is part of a much larger pattern, and if we only blame individuals without addressing the systems, we miss the point." That perspective struck a chord. Organizations across industries began revisiting their bias training programs. Airline CEOs held emergency meetings on how to better prepare frontline staff for handling tense interactions without prejudice. Diversity officers cited Raymond's response as a model of dignity under pressure. And behind the scenes, Skywinds Airlines continued evolving. Raymond worked closely with Vanessa Shaw and the board to roll out an expanded set of reforms, mandatory quarterly workshops, employee performance audits, a new internal escalation protocol, and a feedback loop that allowed passengers and staff alike to anonymously report concerns. The changes weren't just reactionary, they were thoughtful, embedded into the company's new identity. Public reception was largely positive. Major publications ran stories not just about the confrontation, but about how Skywinds was changing in its wake. From scandal to standard-bearer, read one headline. Even outlets that had been critical at first began to acknowledge the company's steps toward restoration. But healing wasn't only happening on the corporate level. Raymond's voice, calm, firm, and visionary, began to influence culture more broadly. Podcasts invited him on to discuss justice and forgiveness. University ethics classes cited his interview clips. People admired that he hadn't called for Felicia's destruction, but for transformation. Perhaps most unexpectedly, he received handwritten letters. Some from young black professionals who had endured similar indignities. Others came from people who admitted to once holding unconscious biases, now shaken awake. One letter stood out. It was short, unsigned, the handwriting shaky. "I used to think people like you didn't belong in first class. I was wrong. I'm trying to change. Thank you for your grace." Raymond kept that note in his desk drawer. Because while the headlines would eventually fade, the human impact, that quiet ripple of self-reflection and growth, was the truest measure of change. It was a brisk spring afternoon at JFK International Airport, the kind where the sunlight sparkled across terminal windows, but the air still held a bite of winter. Raymond Jenkins had just wrapped up a strategic meeting with the Skywinds board, one that focused on the continued rollout of their diversity initiatives. He exited the private conference lounge with his briefcase in hand, heading for a waiting car. The terminal was crowded as always, an ever-moving tide of travelers rolling carry-ons and checking flight screens. But as Raymond passed by a food court near the security checkpoint, something caught his eye. There, slouched on a bench beside a fast food counter, sat a woman he hadn't seen since that unforgettable day, Felicia Morrison. She looked worlds apart from the crisp, assertive gate agent she had once been. Her posture was deflated, her clothes plain. A folder of job applications sat half open on her lap. Her eyes scanned the crowd with the dull hope of someone searching for any flicker of opportunity. Raymond slowed to a stop. For a moment he considered walking on. After all, he owed her nothing. But something deeper tugged at him. Not pity, not pride, just unfinished business. He stepped closer. Felicia. She looked up, startled. Her eyes widened in recognition, and she stood as if jolted by invisible wires. "Oh, I didn't think I'd ever see you again, she stammered. I was just heading out, Raymond said gently. Didn't expect to see you either. She swallowed hard. I lost everything after that day, she admitted, voice cracking. My job, my apartment. I've been trying to find work for months. And I know it was my fault. Her voice trembled. I was angry, and I took it out on you. I thought I was enforcing rules, but I see now. I was enforcing bias. Raymond stood silent for a beat, letting her words land. I'm sorry, she whispered. Truly. He studied her. Really looked at her, not as the woman who humiliated him, but as someone who had been forced to confront herself in the harshest light. There was no arrogance left, just a quiet vulnerability. What are you doing here today? He asked. Felicia motioned to the folder in her hands. Heard there might be a part-time job opening in the food court. I figured anything is better than nothing. Raymond nodded slowly. Then he reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a slim business card. This is my foundation's address. We don't just support startups, we also run retraining programs, second chance pipelines. If you're serious about rebuilding, they can help. Felicia blinked, tears welling. Why would you help me? He met her gaze. Because you're not the only one who's ever needed grace. If you're willing to change, I believe you deserve the chance. She accepted the card with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered. Take care, Felicia. And with that, Raymond walked into the crowd, leaving behind the echoes of a story that began in conflict, but just might end in redemption. Weeks turned into months. The headlines faded, the social media storm quieted, and the public turned its attention elsewhere, as it always does. But for Raymond Jenkins, the airport incident never fully vanished. It lingered like a watermark beneath every speech he gave, every training session he funded, every flight he boarded. And for Felicia Morrison, it became the defining before and after of her life. She did reach out eventually, not with excuses, not with public statements, but by quietly enrolling in a program offered by Raymond's foundation. At first, she showed up with the stiff defensiveness of someone expecting judgment. But week by week, something began to shift. The diversity workshops challenged her. The mentorship circles, led by women and men from the very backgrounds she had once dismissed, confronted her with perspectives she had never bothered to see. There were times she felt exposed, embarrassed, even ashamed. But for the first time in a long while, Felicia didn't run from that discomfort. She sat in it. She learned. She never asked for special treatment, nor did she try to publicly redeem herself. She simply did the work. When asked to share her story during a training module on unconscious bias, she spoke plainly, not with drama or self-pity, but with raw honesty. I didn't see the man in front of me that day, she said, voice soft but unwavering. I saw a stereotype I had absorbed over time. I let my fear and pride speak louder than facts, and it cost me everything. The room had gone silent. A few participants nodded, recognizing the courage it took to say that aloud. Raymond was updated periodically by his staff on Felicia's progress. He never asked for her name to be scrubbed from the case file. He believed in facing what we've done, not erasing it. Still, when he heard of her quiet consistency, her participation in not just the coursework, but the deeper reflection, it struck him. This was karma, he thought. Not as punishment, not as cosmic revenge, but as an unfolding. Karma in its truest form, wasn't about seeing someone fall. It was about witnessing someone choose whether or not to rise differently. And Raymond had risen too. The confrontation, though painful, had elevated his mission. His foundation's programs were growing. Skywind's Airlines had become a case study in corporate accountability. More importantly, a ripple had begun. Companies across industries were re-examining their training, their frontline protocols, their assumptions. Not because they feared scandal, but because someone had dared to hold up a mirror. Raymond didn't need Felicia's gratitude. He didn't expect transformation. But hearing she had taken the first steps on her own was enough. A small but powerful affirmation that change, real change, was possible, and that karma, when guided by justice and tempered by grace, doesn't just come back, it moves forward. The ballroom at Manhattan's Grand Meridian Hotel shimmered beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers. Dozens of tables were arranged in crisp symmetry, each filled with business leaders, social innovators, and philanthropic giants. It was the annual black tie gala for corporate responsibility, a night meant to spotlight progress, generosity, and justice in the private sector. And at the center of it all stood Raymond Jenkins. He approached the stage in a tailored tuxedo applause building as he climbed the steps. The host had just introduced him as a tech visionary and humanitarian force, but Raymond carried none of that weight in his demeanor. He moved with the calm of someone who had learned that accolades matter less than purpose. Taking the podium, he paused for a beat, then began. "I stand before you tonight," he said, voice warm but steady. "Not just as an investor or entrepreneur, but as someone who's come face to face with a question many of us try to avoid. What do we do when we are disrespected, not privately, but publicly and painfully?" The room hushed, forks lowered, wine glasses sat forgotten. Raymond went on to recount the airport confrontation, not with anger, but with clarity. He didn't name Felicia Morrison, nor did he detail every twist and turn. Instead, he distilled the moment to its essence, a reminder that respect is fragile when it is based on assumptions, and that dignity should never be conditional on how someone looks or where they come from. "We all make mistakes," he continued, scanning the audience. "But what defines us isn't the moment we fall short, it's what we do afterward. Whether we ignore the harm or we try to grow. Whether we justify our bias or we choose to uproot it." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. In the end, Raymond said, "It's not about revenge. It's about repair. I've seen what's possible when institutions respond with accountability. But more importantly, I've seen what's possible when individuals, yes, even the ones who've done harm, decide to learn to listen, to evolve." The applause began slowly, then grew into a standing ovation. Some people wiped their eyes. Others simply nodded, as though something deeply unspoken had finally been voiced aloud. Back at his table, Raymond took his seat beside a representative from Skywind's Airlines and a young scholarship recipient from his foundation. The boy leaned over and whispered, "That was powerful." "I didn't know you went through something like that." Raymond smiled. "That's the point. Most people don't. But when they do, maybe they'll remember moments like this and choose better." That night, as the gala drew to a close and guests trickled out into the New York night, Raymond stood a little taller. Not for the applause, not even for the recognition, but because he'd turned pain into purpose and helped others see the path forward. Life, as it often does, moved forward, but it didn't forget. In the months following the viral airport incident, both Raymond Jenkins and Felicia Morrison found themselves on vastly different, yet forever intertwined journeys. For Felicia, the aftermath had been nothing short of harrowing. Once a respected gate agent with years of tenure, she had watched her career dissolve in the public eye. She now worked the front desk at a small travel agency in Queens, a far cry from the authority and fast-paced energy of JFK's terminals. Her name had once carried weight in Skywind circles. Now it was a cautionary tale passed among airline staff and whispered about in industry break rooms. But Felicia was changing. Slowly. Genuinely. She no longer saw herself as the victim of a PR scandal. In quiet moments, she admitted to herself that her actions were rooted in bias. Her knee-jerk suspicion, the escalation, the refusal to listen, all had been built on assumptions. Every morning at the travel agency, she interacted with a diverse clientele. And now, armed with perspective, she practiced patience she once lacked. Her co-workers noticed. Her tone had softened. She even started volunteering for a local program that provided resume workshops for immigrants and ex-offenders re-entering the workforce. Though her scar remained visible in the digital age, she chose not to hide it. She told her story candidly during group trainings, not to excuse her past, but to warn others about what prejudice can cost. Her fall had taught her humility. Her slow rise back taught her empathy. Meanwhile, Raymond's world had only grown. His foundation expanded its footprint, launching mentorship programs in cities across the country. Skywind's airlines embraced his proposed reforms and became a model for corporate inclusion training. Raymond was frequently invited to speak at business schools, panels, and summits, but he never let fame distort his mission. And still, despite all his accomplishments, that moment at Gate A12 lingered in his memory. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. It reminded him of the power of standing tall in moments of quiet injustice. It reminded him that real change doesn't always begin in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the everyday places: a gate, a classroom, a waiting line. Felicia's name would never again be on a Skywind's badge. But she was learning, growing, and that mattered to Raymond. He didn't believe in erasing the past, but he did believe in rewriting the future, one conversation, one policy, one second chance at a time. And so, in a world often divided by assumptions, this story came to symbolize something rare. A hard lesson met with grace, and a public humiliation that blossomed quietly into personal redemption. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something far better. It was real. Thank you for joining me on this intense journey of conflict, karma, and ultimately transformation. This story reminds us that prejudice can lurk in ordinary moments like waiting at an airport gate and can explode into life-changing events in seconds. But it also shows us that every crisis carries a seed of growth if we're willing to reflect, learn, and change our perspectives. If this story moved you, I invite you to help spread its message. Share this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel so we can continue uncovering the stories that challenge injustice and celebrate second chances. By liking, sharing, and subscribing, you help amplify the voices that stand for equity, compassion, and hope. Together, let's keep the conversation going and build a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity.